Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with Emmett Muckles. Remember, everyone, we are in a paradigm shift of historical proportions. I'm just going to say it like this. It may be uncomfortable, but growth is typically uncomfortable. You have to have and practice social distancing so that we can move forward in the future. And I'm going to tell it to you like this. There was this plague that took out a third of the earth. It was called the Black Plague. They didn't understand social distancing. There was the Spanish flu. We have advanced so far technologically that we thought we were immune. Well, God had another thing for you. Put you in your place, and this is the time to sit back and do as little as possible. You want to know why that is? Because you've been praying, which means you've been talking to God. Now it's time for you to do nothing so God can tell you what to do. So sit back, relax, and in that time, we're going to show you how to fix yourself. Today, my guest is Faust Ruggiero. Did I get it right?
You're close.
I knew I was going to do it. And, we talked about this because my name is Emmett Muckles, and over the course of history. But you know what? Because I have him here, I can work on that and I can fix myself. How you doing, my friend? So how are you?
I'm good. I'm in Pennsylvania. It's a little overcast. We're doing all that social distancing and all those things we have to do. But I'm good.
So let's go a little bit to the backstory. Tell me how you got to now. I mean, what's your personal journey? We can get the meat of it.
Well, I'm that guy who, from the time I was a little kid, everybody came to and said, gee, can you help me with this? I guess I just had that personality. Yep. I listen to people. I'm a person of faith, so I always knew what to draw on, I think. So it just took off from that point. Went through high school that way, and then in college, it was natural for me to go into psychology. Came out of Illinois State University, and
IU, huh?
I am. That's me. And went right into counseling with deaf kids, substance abuse people. I counseled in a prison, so just went into that, and then 30 years ago, started private practice. So here I am.
Now, where did the book come from? Everybody has a book in them. I believe this. Whether it's your story for your family to have or some expertise that you've worked through, what was it that said, I have to take this and put it so that it will last longer than myself?
Right. Like everyone else who begins counseling, you're taught to do all the various things you're taught to do. You're taught all the procedures that are going to work. And then as you go through the counseling experience, you start weeding out things. And then you start putting things in. And what I started to realize was that certain processes were working better with my clients than others. And those are things like honesty and humility and faith and trust and love and, communication. So I started to weed things out, put things in, and I came up with about 51 processes that I knew I was using all the time. So really got formal about it and put it into a program that I call the Process Way of Life. And I've been using it for 20 years. I've worked with about 2,000 people or so with it, and it's just gotten wonderful results. People are embracing it. And actually, why write a book? Is people were saying to me, you need to put this into a teaching format that we can all read and follow, and it's always going to be with us. And I thought about that. And about 4 years ago, I said, well, let's do it. So we sat down, did it in December of last year. It was published.
Awesome. So what is the process way of life?
It is using those processes. We really all do this every day.
Yeah.
As you opened up, you were talking about faith. That's a process. And it's a process to bring that into your life. It's a process to develop it. It's the same thing with honesty. It's the same thing with trust. It's all those things that when we don't have them, we begin working with negative things. We're angry, we're conflicted, those sorts of things. So the process way of life just takes all of those processes, puts them in a program that starts from what I think is the beginning, when you take your life off autopilot or you hit your bottom, whatever it is, and you say, I got to do something here.
Right.
And not only do I have to, I'm going to, and I'm willing to do the work. And that's process number one. And then we go from there. We start talking about honesty and slowing things down and getting your intellect over your emotions and all those kinds of things. So it just flows to the point where we get to the end of the book and you get things like humility and gratitude and faith and all those, what I call the higher order processes. And so we start from the beginning and we just work through till we get to that point. And the book is set up just the same way as the counseling program is.
Do you find that some people get in their own way, even when they have the answer? It's right here. You're like, I have this thing. Even if you give it a try, you're going to grow from it. But they're just so resistant. They're just, they're in a quagmire. They know what they're doing is not working, but they're not willing to accept something new.
There's that free will we all have. It's when people will say to me, how could God let this happen? And I say, because your free will guided it in that direction. And it's the same one that resists people when we say, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I can show you this. It definitely works. You will see some improvements. But the key to the program is that you're going to do it the rest of your life. And that's the key that people don't want. If you can give them something that works in 5 easy steps, they're great. But when you say, no, this is a work in progress and your life goes on every day, so you should be using these every day too, that's when they break down a little bit. And when they don't get things their own way, of course.
So do you think this is generational? And what I mean by generational, I've been alive long enough to see my grandparents' generation or have a little bit of introduction to my grandparents' generation. And they were coming out of the, I would say, the 20s, the 30s, where they came into life. And they had these very conservative values. And then my parents' generation, which was conservative, but it was a little looser. And then you get to my generation where it got a little looser still to where it's produced the generations now. So that's about 3 or 4 generations that have taken down the notch. Do you see there's an issue with discipline in changing your life?
I do, and I come from the same background you do in that respect. My grandparents out of the 20s and 30s. My parents were married in the late 40s, and I watched all that discipline, that they lived by the history, and they tried to bring that forward. And we're not doing that quite as much as we used to. And we have a generation right now, I think, that is a product of parenting that said, well, gee, I don't want to be so tough as my parents were. And they loosened things up. And now we have this group we call the millennials who don't have the processes. They really have a difficult time listening to this because we say, you're going to do work and it's not going to yield results that are going to be right there for you tomorrow. And you're not going to be able to have those the way you want them. So that's the issue. And there are a lot of good young people who are willing to do the work.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due, but it did produce that part of things where we didn't give them the processes when they were young. If I didn't have them when I was young, I probably didn't develop this program. I knew what the work was about. I knew what the processes were. So that's what I'm trying to push forward. And as long as I get them to stay for a couple of months, usually we're pretty good. It's that first 2 or 3 weeks where they say, I'm going to be doing this how long?
So, and I'm diverging because you have some great information. I mean, just this interim that we've been talking, it conjured more questions up for me other than the ones that I had preset for you. Because you made me think of something related to the human condition, which is Buddhist monks say, if you give me a child up to the age of, for the first 7 years of their life, that I can show you the adult. I can tell you what this person will be. And do you think that if we were to adopt certain measures, and this sounds kind of weird because it sounds like programming, but I'm just thinking, because I've seen it. I had this business where I dealt with preschoolers, and I could see the difference between a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old in their character. Like the 6 and under, they were like, yeah, let's do this. And the 7-year-old was like, I'm going to run this thing.
That's right.
That was just a divergence for me. But how does one start this program?
You know, if you're coming into the counseling program, obviously with me, we're gonna look at where you are right now and then how you got there. We need that information so that you can see the picture up to this point. Then we're gonna, obviously, as I said, get your life off autopilot, make some choices about going forward. You want to fix yourself. Now, if you're not and you're reading the book, it's presented in the same design. You're gonna you're going to get a list of all the processes so you can see them, and then we're going to look at those one step at a time. Each chapter is laid out the way I think counseling has to be done. We present a problem.
Yep.
We talk about that problem. We give all the history. Let's understand the problem. At the end of every chapter, I go into exactly the steps you need to take to begin to fix that problem, and I do that for 36 chapters until you get through the program. I didn't make the chapters long because the way people are learning today, I call it microwave learning. You know, give me it now, give me it fast. I want the Reader's Digest version, and I want to move on. So when I designed the book, I said, okay, let's take this very slowly. And we started with the problem of brutal honesty is one of the chapters. And I'll do a little quote there, which helps them remember it. Then they get a list of all the processes we're going to use to help that along. Then the text starts. Here's how this developed. This is where you got off track. These are the kind of things we're going to start looking at and what we want you to do. Then we go into the steps. And these are all the things you need to be doing. And if you're willing to do these every day, then things are going to work out. We do that 36 times. And it's also set up as a reference book. Since the chapters are 4 or 5 pages long, if you go off track and you say, oh, geez, there I am. I'm angry again. I can go back to the chapter on anger, read the 3 or 4 pages, get right to the steps that I need to do, and I can jumpstart it all over again.
So years ago, my uncle told me to get this book. Not your book, but a book by Og Mandino. And it gives you read basically a chapter a week. So, and if you follow this within 21 days to 30 days, you can really transform your life. And it starts out with appreciation. What are some of the things that people need to get fixed that rank high in your professional opinion?
It's a good question, and I answered that when I wrote the book because I knew it would be asked, and also I knew it's the right way to go if you're going to get people started. I start the book with 4 chapters. These are what I call the opening bookend chapters, and they are brutal honesty. If you're not willing to get really honest with yourself, even if it's going to hurt, and most of the time it's going to, if you're in conflict and things aren't working out right, you're going to have to go and inside yourself and get those facts. Then I talk about slowing down life because we go so fast and we're not willing to look at information. So we got to catch up, let our minds catch up with the information. Then the 3rd chapter, I talk about getting your intellect over your emotions. Not that you can't have emotions, but get it expressed first. You can always put your emotions in later, but let's have your emotions being expressed based on facts. So I want them to look at the factual information first. And then we're going to talk about all the things we have to do in order to move from that point. But if you don't get those items down, if you don't slow down, get real honest, work with the facts, and respond with your intellect at least before your emotion, everything gets confused. That's how we got here, by not doing those things.
You're absolutely right, because especially we hear this thing called fake news, and we are inundated with information. Not all of it is totally accurate. Some of it is fluff, and then you have this little piece of content that's really aimed at you, and it's all geared toward to give or to produce an emotional response. Because if I can control your emotions, I can control you.
That's right.
And a lot of people don't realize that, and because people think I'm cold sometimes when I go into a situation. They're like, "Oh, you're not being fair." Why am I not being fair? Well, you made me feel. I don't care how you feel. Let's look at what happened, or what's going to happen, or what we have to do. There's no emotion in that. It's either you want to do it or you don't want to do it. You either feel like you want to do it or you don't feel like it. Remove that, and then we can get the stuff done. So I totally agree with you, because it has totally wrecked our sense of well-being. And I'm going to say this again, balance. And you talk about balance.
That's the goal of the program. Internal balance is the goal of the program. Getting the intellect and the emotions and the body and the spirit in a place where they kind of work together. And if you think about it, if you get up on any given day and physically you feel good, your emotions are good, you're not conflicted, you're not overly emotional, and you have that connection to your spirit, you feel good that day.
Yep.
So the closer we can get to being that way all the time, or at least most of the time, the better off we are. So we want that balance. And again, we have to do all those things, slow down, get honest with ourselves. And, once we get honest with ourselves and we slow down, get your brain working with the facts, it's real hard for fake news to sell us on anything, because if you're honest with yourself and you're doing all these things internally first, it's real hard for the external to get in and invade that space, because you got it pretty well formed in there.
Do you cover, or at least point people into the direction of the physical? Because, pre the show, you and I both were talking about, we both had a workout. And with this COVID situation, for about 2 weeks, I did absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were talking to the fact that we might have bed sores because we sat on the couch for so much. But, after that 2 weeks, I noticed a change in my wife. I noticed a change in my children. I noticed a change in myself. And it's inertia. A thing at rest wants to stay at rest.
Right.
So used the free will. And I said, look, at the very least, we're going to do 2-3 mile walks a day at a good clip, just to get outside, because sun produces vitamin D. There's a whole host of other things. So do you bring that to the fact, because sometimes people can get into a rut because they have these other things that are working up in balance, but they have their physicality is just so low that it's pulling everything else down, or hampering the progress of everything else.
I do. And I start with that slowing down the body thing. And there, because people will say, well, great, how do I slow down? And I'll always say, start with your breathing and slow that down first. I mean, that's the first element. Plus, it keeps you grounded in the moment, because you have to do something right there. Then I'll talk about food intake. I'll talk about not putting the coffees and the caffeines in your system, because, people do that in the morning. They get up and the first thing they do is have 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee. So what you've done is put a stimulant in your body, which has a tendency to rob your body of the hydration it needs, which occurs at the cellular level, and we're starting our day that way.
Yeah.
And then what happens when we go artificial is that the body says, well, you're putting all this in here, I'm not going to make more of it, then we're really going to have a problem. So the body shuts down a little bit. Well, the next day you get up and the body's not doing what it's supposed to do, so you got to put your chemical, your stimulants back in. It starts there. I talk about exercise and how you can take that one step at a time. You can start with 5 push-ups a day, or run in place for 30 seconds, and then develop it from that point, but get it constant. And what you said is what I saw with everyone going through this virus situation. normal routine stopped for whatever reason.
Yeah, it did.
And I'm counseling people, and they're calling me, and people are emailing me, how should I start this? And I said, the first thing is you're going to stay in the house. Don't deviate. And if you didn't, because a lot of people went to gyms to work out. So then do something in the house, even if it's jump rope or run in place or walk around your house or do whatever. Keep your body going first. The body is the first thing we have to work on because it carries us everywhere. Yep. We can talk about the intellect and the emotions, and they're all encased in the body. And if the body's off, we don't think well, we don't feel well. So I put a fairly reasonable amount of emphasis throughout the book on the physical.
Yeah, and I can't say enough. There's if you're into religion like I am, or I went to Catholic schools, and I remember them always talking about this Trinity. They were talking about the Trinity, and it didn't really hit me until I was an adult that, us as humans have our own Trinity. We have our mind, we have our body, and we have our spirit. And all those require work so that we could keep those, that triangle, the angles all equal. So how can people find more about you? I mean, this is great information.
I have a website. myname.com, faustreggiro.com. It has the entire book laid out. I mean, chapter by chapter, it has an outline, and it has everything about me. They can see me doing podcasts and television interviews, things like that. They can ask me questions. People will email me constantly and ask me, how do I do this or how do I do that? When they buy the book, they're saying, well, how do I read this the right way? Which I actually, I have in the beginning of the book, I said, this is the way you have to read this book. So they can find all that information just by going to the website.
That's a good point, because not all books can be read from start to finish.
No.
Because sometimes you can lose people because certain areas don't pertain to them, and they get lost. They're like, this doesn't pertain to me. But then if they kept on, they have an epiphany and go, oh, this is for me right here. That was all leading up. So, it's part of a process. Do you do any online counseling? Do you have any Zoom meetings? Do you meet with people one-on-one?
No, I don't do that. It's just a time situation. I'm still, 45 or so hours a week at the office. I'm still seeing my people. Yeah. And then I'm doing, of course, marketing for the book and all those kinds of things. So it doesn't leave me much time for online kinds of things. That, at the end of the year, I'm probably going to really, because I'm 65 now, I'll probably slow down the in-office time, and I may pick up the online things a little bit more. We'll see how things go, but I don't do it online with people. But I do answer questions, and sometimes I'll have them call me if you want to have a brief 5 or 10 minute conversation. I don't charge them for that,
Well, awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, remember this. We talked about it. You are a Trinity. You are not one thing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to break it down to you. You started off as two independent things. A cell from someone and a cell from another person. They came together. There was a cosmic spark, ping, and they began to replicate inside your mom, which 2 became 4, 4 became 8. By 30 days in, you were over 1 billion cells, so you were a billionaire before you even got to the planet. We are fractal beings. Just like there's stars in the sky, there's a place for you. You are 1 in a million, 1 in a billion, but you're also part of the collective. Just think of it like this. Inside your body is this thing called a cell. You are a slave to your cell, which makes you yourself. So remember that. You are more than what you think you are, but you're part of a big picture. So I'm going to put it to you like this. When you get out the shower and you go to the mirror and you look into the mirror, and you'll see your eyes, which are like nebulae in the sky. When you find someone with nebulae like yours, treat them with love, honor, and respect. As the doctrine said, treat your brother and your sister as you want to be treated. Till next time, love you all. Peace.